one part of our mission statement as a band is just trying to bring back, what is magical about a band. And that is some of this energy that only becomes possible when 5 people are having a good time playing in a room together in a basement somewhere. And that sort of that like alt rock, that punk element of
do it yourself.
Yeah. That sort of, the kind of just like fuck it mentality. I mean, I think that's a part of what feels lost to some extent in a lot of modern music today. I mean, I think a lot of stuff is so curated, it's so perfect, and it really is just in line with culture as a whole, with sort of the Instagram and these face filters and people auto-tuning their voices and trying to hide their imperfections. Like, we just want to make stuff that is like super authentic and is putting those things that are unique on display. Like, we don't want to sound like all the other bands on the radio. Like, we'd much rather, if we would want to sound like anything, we'd want to sound like a band from like the 60s and have it be rooted in live performance and musicianship and the humanity of it all.
I was listening to music with someone recently, and they were hearing the vocals, and they said, I think they're a little pitchy. And I think it's just because they weren't auto-tuned heavily. And sometimes our modern ear is so used to hearing autotune, or at least something heavily melodined, which is another corrective software, that we don't know what real vocals sound like when they're meshed together without heavy effects. And I know the band that I'm thinking of, they wouldn't have used a lot of heavy effects because they're great singers. So
yeah, and there's just the thing that with like autotune is pitch is flexible as well. And this is something that, a software like Melodyne will show you. For those of you out there who are listening and don't know, Melodyne is this software that gives you this really detailed control of like every single note in your vocal, where you can pitch it and change the shape of it and the tone of it. And a lot of pop artists, I mean, we've used it on some of our stuff just when it's been necessary. But I mean, overall, I think we try to make it sound as natural of a performance as possible. But you really see with these softwares where you can control the individual pitches, sometimes right on the pitch, a perfect pitch is not what sounds the best in the song. Like, you want things to have some wiggle room. And actually, this was something that Tony Dugan, the producer we were working with, mentioned, is that back in the day, instruments weren't tuned perfectly. Everything was slightly out of tune with each other, and it actually gave vocalists a better ability to sing and have it sound in key. Like, these days, everything with digital instruments where it's perfectly, it's like it's on, like a 440 hertz, like A note or something. And it's every single part of the track is perfectly in tune. So if there's any fluctuation in your voice, it sounds like a mistake. But back in the day and in these older records, people were tuning their guitars by ear. The piano in the studio, like, hadn't been tuned in, a year. So it's like drifted a little bit out of key. And that natural sort of differences in the instruments just gives you this pocket where the pitch can exist and it still sounds good.
That's something that I realized when I started recording vocals in quarantine, because when I was watching tutorials and people were talking about layering vocals, I was thinking, as someone who's never recorded any vocals before, I was like, why don't I just record it once and then I just copy and paste it 3 times and it'll just be layered? And this guy in a tutorial was saying, no, the imperfections in your voice on each take will make it sound better. You want like one take maybe like slightly flat in one spot and one maybe slightly sharp, and like when they're all together, that shit will sound fire because it's like it's filling each other out. So I was like, oh, it's like the imperfections in your voice are actually helping the song come together. And I was like, oh fuck, like that's crazy.
We totally use that technique on all of our stuff, by the way, of recording our individual vocals more than once and then kind of stacking it together. That's definitely a very frequently used trick in our book.
It's good to have technical knowledge and background and stuff so that you can achieve what you want to achieve. But there's a lot to be said for just breaking the rules and doing things that are that some people might insult certain people in certain fields. Like the way we record some of our stuff in the studio would probably like make certain producers have heart attacks because it's just so wrong. But it actually ends up creating a sound that's unlike anything else because it's just not proper.
It's not that it's like wrong. It's just that, you know, we for one have had to build this studio space for kind of the mentality of like, what is the cheapest thing that we can buy that'll still sound good? And so we have all, you know, our microphones aren't super fancy. It's kind of a no frills thing. We have a few things, like if you can see the video of me, we have like some old synthesizers which were, you know, passed down from my dad to us, and you know, we have our select things that are, you know, pretty like expensive investments, but as far as like our recording gear, it is nowhere near what, you know, these big fancy studios have. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like something I think about a lot is, you know, you can't like make, like the tools that you have are really important in shaping the outcome of your art, right? And so if you only have access to crayons and like colored pencils, like you're not going to make something that looks like the Mona Lisa, but you can make something that looks totally awesome and cooler than anything that somebody could have made with oil paint back in the day, if you just learn how to use your tools in a way that's unique to you. And just allowing your creative limitations to become part of your personality as an artist. And I think as a producer and as part of our recording setup, we've had to sort of embrace whatever, you know, unique things that we do with our recording setup that are different. But that's the other thing, is that there's not really a good or bad. I mean, certainly there's some objectivity to, like, you know, your things you're recording are distorting. It sounds horrible. It sounds like you're recording it with a cell phone. But there's other things that are just a matter of flavor and taste and character. And, you know, you can use a microphone that costs $10 and it sounds really cool. I mean, at the end of the day, too, everything is being bounced to an MP3 and being played through a phone speaker.
There's this rectangular thing on the wall behind Ryan, like this blue thing, if you see it, that we're using for sort of sound insulation, you know, so that and it's from his bed when he was in New York.
It's like a foam.
It's like a foam thing, and instead of going and buying, like, well, I think part of our creative process is because we're broke, but
that definitely factors into it.
Instead of going and buying a fancy thing, that works really well. And I was just like, oh, let me hammer this on the wall. And I took like nails and I hammered it up there. And it works so well right by the drums, so that all the sounds that I'm making don't just bounce around the room and create, you know, terrible bleed and stuff.
Yeah, there's a certain sense of just trying to work with what you got. And I think a good message to any person out there, whether they just have GarageBand or, you know, they would see musicians like us with, I mean, I would consider what we have a pretty fancy getup. I mean, it's been, you know, like 8 years of collecting material and all of us kind of bringing together the things that we've acquired in our years. Like Eric's drum set is this fantastic, like vintage set from a while ago. And we have, you know, like an actual piano. It's like we have things that are, you know, a lot of producers starting out don't have, but like, you know, just even if you have just a laptop or just a single microphone, like you can make something amazing with that, and just learn to embrace your creative limitations. Because sitting around and sort of pondering the what ifs of, you know, I'm never going to be able to make something that sounds good because I don't have this microphone, or getting into the mindset of you just have to keep buying and buying and buying, like nothing at the end of the day can compensate for the songwriting itself and how you perform your instrument, whether that be your voice or your guitar. Yeah. It's like those are the things that people, especially when they're starting out, should focus most of their attention on. Because I think I would like to think in some way that we've proven that. Yeah. We certainly have a good balance of like nice gear and really cheap stuff that's accessible to anyone starting out. But I definitely believe the idea of, you know, even if all you have is a cell phone, like you can find a way to make good music and have it be unique.